After my husband died, I thought the hardest part would be grief. I was wrong, his family tried to take my son from me. I wasn't supposed to be the one standing in front of the casket. Not this young, not like this. Daniel was 34. Heart attack in his sleep. No warnings. No time to say goodbye. One night we were bickering about the dishwasher, the next I was on the kitchen floor, screaming his name, trying to wake up a dead man. The funeral was quiet, dignified. That's how he would have wanted it. He hated attention, hated fuss. His one request, written in a dog-eared notebook we kept for practical things like mortgage info and emergency contacts, was simple: if anything ever happens to me, bury me in Cedar Hill. With my family. Cedar Hill. One stoplight, 2 churches, a barbecue joint and a gas station. The kind of place where folks still nod at each other in passing and everyone knows everyone else's business. He hadn't been back in years. We lived in Austin, had a life that never really needed to look backward. He called his folks on holidays, sent cards. That was it. I never pushed, never asked why he kept his distance. I figured if he wanted to tell me, he would. So when I made the call to his parents, I expected tears. I expected grief. I didn't expect enthusiasm. "Oh, thank God," his mother, Judith, said. Not "I'm so sorry." Not "How are you holding up?" Just, "He's coming home." That was the first warning sign. But I was numb. Grief moves like molasses and lightning at the same time. You can't think straight. You just move through it, like fog. So I packed up the SUV, buckled our 5-year-old son Owen into the back seat, and drove 3 hours east with Daniel's body in a black car ahead of us. His family paid for the funeral. They said it was the least they could do. I let them. I wasn't in the mood to argue, and honestly, we didn't have the savings for a full burial. The house in Austin was mortgaged. I was still waiting on his life insurance payout. I told myself it was kindness. Generosity. Now, I know better. The funeral was all wrong. Too many people, not one of them from our life. Not a single coworker, not a single friend. Just rows of relatives I'd never met, whispering behind their hands. All of them looked at me like I was some outsider who'd broken into their world. I stood beside the casket while strangers patted my arm and told me how strong I was. Judith squeezed my hand with cold fingers and told Owen, "You look just like your daddy did at your age." It was meant to be sweet. It wasn't. When the last hymn ended and the dirt hit the casket, I exhaled for the first time in days. I thought, finally, we can go home. Judith stopped me in the parking lot. "Come by the house," she said. "Just for a bit. You shouldn't be alone tonight." I hesitated. But Owen was tired and hungry, and I didn't want to stop at a fast food joint in my black dress. So I nodded. I should have kept driving. Their house sat on the edge of town, big and white, with wraparound porches and rocking chairs that hadn't moved in decades. Inside, everything smelled like lemon polish and mothballs. Daniel's childhood photos still hung in the hallway. His high school football jersey framed above the mantel. His father, Charles, poured me a whiskey without asking if I wanted one. "We'll help you," he said. With Owen. With everything. I thanked him, genuinely. I hadn't even figured out how to update the car title yet, much less how to handle a will. It felt good to be offered help. But then Judith leaned in and said, "We'll make sure he stays close to the family. He's a Miller, after all." The way she said it made my stomach turn. We didn't stay the night. I said Owen needed his bed, and we left. As I buckled him in, he asked, "Why does Grandma talk like she owns me?" I laughed. But not really. 2 days later, I got a phone call. It was Charles. "We've had a family meeting," he said, like I was a guest at a dinner party, not the widow of their son. "And we've decided. It would be best if Owen stayed here. We can provide for him. Well, I'm sure this has all been overwhelming for you." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "He's my son." Charles's voice changed. Cold. Sharp. "He's a Miller. that means something here. And that's when the war began. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not because I thought they'd really try to take Owen. Not yet. But something in Charles's voice stuck with me, like a sliver under the skin. It wasn't grief. It wasn't concern. It was possession. Like Owen was a piece of land, something to be claimed. The lawyer was a recommendation from my friend, Rachel, family law, based out of Austin. We met over Zoom. I explained what had happened at the funeral, the call from Charles, and the weird way they kept referring to Owen as a Miller, like that alone meant they had a say in his life. She didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off. She leaned in and said, "Do you have full legal custody?" That's when my stomach dropped. I'd never thought about it before. Daniel and I were married, our names both on the birth certificate. We lived together, raised Owen together. There was no custody agreement because there didn't need to be one. But now, with Daniel gone, that left just me. Or so I thought. They could try to argue for grandparent rights, the lawyer explained. Especially in Texas, where there's precedent for it. If they have the money, they could drag you into court and make your life hell. I asked the obvious question, can they win? She hesitated. That told me everything. The next week was a blur of documents, notarizations, phone calls. I got Daniel's death certificate, started the life insurance claim, and began the process of getting Owen's school records updated. Every form I filled out reminded me he was gone. Every checkbox beside widowed felt like a punch. Owen started having nightmares. He wouldn't talk about them, but I'd find him curled up in my bed most mornings, clinging to my arm like a life raft. He was only 5, and already, the world was shifting underneath him. One night, I found him looking out the window. Just staring. "Mom," he said, "why does Grandpa keep calling me their little heir?" I froze. When did he say that? On the phone. He said, "We'll raise him right, the Miller way. He's our little heir." What's an heir? I smiled tightly. It means someone who gets something when someone else is gone. Like a gift. Or land. He frowned. I don't want land. I just want to stay here. You will, I said, brushing his hair back. But I was lying. Because I didn't know that anymore. 2 weeks later, I got the letter. Official letterhead. Law firm in Cedar Hill. Terse, precise language. They were requesting a formal discussion of custodial arrangements for the minor child Owen Miller. Attached was a letter from Charles and Judith's attorney, claiming they had serious concerns about my emotional stability and ability to provide a consistent environment. I laughed out loud when I read it. Emotional stability? I'd just buried my husband. Of course I was a wreck. Who wouldn't be? But I didn't laugh for long. Because enclosed was a statement from Daniel's cousin, some woman I'd met exactly once, saying I'd been erratic at the funeral, that I'd refused offers of help, and that I stormed out with the child, visibly upset. They were building a case. My lawyer told me to stay calm. To document everything. They're going to try to show that you're unfit. Don't give them anything. So I did everything by the book. Every doctor's appointment, every school drop-off, every email, documented. I enrolled Owen in counseling. I kept a folder for receipts, attendance logs, progress reports. Every time he drew a picture, I dated it and added it to the pile. And then the phone calls started. Not from the lawyers, from random people in Cedar Hill. A distant aunt. A second cousin. Even a preacher from Daniel's old church. All with the same sugar-sweet tone, "We just want what's best for Owen. This must be so hard on you. Wouldn't it be easier to let family help?" Help. That word again. It was never a question. It was a suggestion with a hook buried inside. I told them all the same thing, he's my son. And every time I said it, it sounded a little more like a threat. It was a Thursday morning when I saw the first sign someone had crossed a line. I came out to my car, parked in front of our rental, and saw the note under the windshield wiper. Folded neatly. Plain white paper. "You're not the only family he has." That was it. No name. No signature. No fingerprints, according to the police. Just a quiet little threat, written in block letters, tucked under my wiper like a parking ticket. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked back into the house, locked every door, and stood there, listening to the silence. And for the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding since the funeral. What if they take him from me? It happened on a Sunday. A quiet morning, sun just warming the porch, Owen still in pajamas watching cartoons with his cereal half-eaten beside him. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, scrolling through job listings with one eye, the kind you click on, then forget you clicked. The knock wasn't loud. It was polite. Measured. Like someone was waiting to be invited. I opened the door and froze. It wasn't Charles. It wasn't Judith. It was a woman in a gray blazer, clipboard in hand, soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mrs. Miller? I'm with Child Protective Services. Do you have a moment? There are certain words that punch you in the throat before your brain even catches up. CPS. Protective Services. You hear them in horror stories, not yours. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? She handed me a card. Plain font, state seal. It was real. We received an anonymous report regarding the well-being of your son. Just a few things we need to check in on. My mouth was dry. He's 5. He's inside watching Bluey. He's fine. I'm sure he is, she said smoothly. These things are usually just formalities. She said it like a waitress reciting the specials. Like this wasn't my life. She stepped into my home like it belonged to her. Made small talk with Owen, who, God bless him, didn't even flinch. Offered him a sticker. Then started asking questions. Did he have his own bed? Yes. Was there food in the fridge? Yes. Was I employed? I was freelance, between clients, not unemployed. Not that it mattered. She jotted down notes. Walked through the kitchen. Peeked in the bathroom. All so casual, like she wasn't measuring me for a guillotine. When she sat back down, her tone changed. There were some concerns raised about your emotional state. About the support system you may or may not have. Do you have friends nearby? Family? I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was surreal. No. My husband's family lives in Cedar Hill. They're the ones who called you, I assume. She didn't confirm. She didn't deny. Just circled something on her form. After she left, I sat on the floor in the hallway and shook. Owen came over and crawled into my lap. Was that a teacher? He asked. No, I said. Just someone checking in. Did I do something wrong? That broke me. I held him, hard, and whispered, You're perfect. Nothing about this is your fault. But I didn't believe myself. Not anymore. I called my lawyer that afternoon. She sighed as soon as I told her. They're escalating. They're trying to build a pattern, emotional instability, paranoia, now CPS involvement. They want to make you look unfit without actually proving it in court. Can they take him? I asked. Not unless you give them something to work with. But this is how it starts: noise, pressure, surveillance. They want you rattled. They want you to make a mistake. I didn't say anything. Just stared at the blank wall in front of me. You need to start thinking about getting out of Austin, she added. Find somewhere safe. Somewhere neutral. They know where you are. That's not working in your favor. I looked at my son, curled up on the couch with his stuffed dinosaur. We weren't safe. Not here. That night, I changed every password. I reset my phone. I locked down my social media. I started looking at small towns out of state, not Cedar Hill small, but far enough that nobody would show up unannounced. Rachel offered to take us in for a few weeks. She lived outside Denver, had space, and more importantly, no ties to Daniel's family. I said I'd think about it. I didn't want to run. But I wasn't sure I had a choice. The next day, someone slashed my tires. No note this time. Just 4 clean cuts, front and back. I filed a police report. The officer nodded, sympathetic, but not surprised. Could have been anyone, he said. But it wasn't anyone. I knew exactly who it was. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up, phone in hand, scrolling through photos of Daniel and Owen at the park. Daniel on the swings. Owen on his shoulders. Both of them laughing. Ordinary moments that felt 100 years old. I loved him. God help me, I still did. But he left me with this storm, and I was the only one holding the umbrella. At 3:17 a.m. I packed a bag. Not for a vacation. For war. I didn't leave Austin right away. Maybe I should have, maybe it would have made things easier. But part of me was still holding out hope that someone, somewhere in that family, would come to their senses. Admit this had gone too far. That they were grieving and scared and lashing out. That maybe, just maybe, we could all take a breath and remember that Daniel had loved me once, that I was Owen's mother. But no one came. Instead, I got a summons. Charles and Judith Miller were filing a suit in Travis County Family Court, petitioning for joint managing conservatorship of Owen. In plain English? They wanted legal rights over my son. Not custody, not yet, but enough power to start making decisions. Education. Healthcare. Where he lived. It was the first real punch to the gut. Before, it had all been whispers and notes and slashed tires. Now it was signatures and file numbers and motions. It was real. I brought the papers to my lawyer, and she just stared at them for a long moment. They're serious, she said. This isn't about grief anymore. This is about control. I asked what my chances were. She didn't sugarcoat it. You're the biological mother. You've done nothing wrong. But they have money, influence, and a narrative. And now they have CPS on record, even if that visit went nowhere. So what do I do? Her answer was brutal, we fight. But you need to be perfect. No mistakes. No outbursts. No surprises. Because they'll come after everything, your finances, your mental health, your friends, your past. I nodded. What else could I do? They played dirty from the start. 2 days after the suit was filed, I got a visit from a local journalist. Nice guy, fresh face, too eager. Said he was doing a piece on family legacy in rural Texas, and wanted to ask about the Millers and their history in Cedar Hill. I shut the door in his face. But the next morning, a story ran online. Widow and son at center of Miller family custody dispute. Nothing libelous. Nothing actionable. Just enough to stir the pot. A quote from Charles about honoring our son's wishes and preserving the family bond. No mention of me. No quote from my side. It was calculated. Measured. PR with a smile. Then came the depositions. I sat in a bland, gray office while Judith's lawyer, a woman with perfect nails and a voice like a scalpel, asked me question after question. Was I seeing anyone? Had I ever used antidepressants? Why had Daniel been estranged from his family for so long? He wasn't estranged, I snapped. He just didn't go back. That's not the same thing. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. And yet he asked to be buried there. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Every answer felt like a trap. Every silence an accusation. Meanwhile, Owen was watching Bluey and drawing dinosaurs. He had no idea his world was on fire. I kept him in school, kept his routine normal. But I started sleeping with my phone on my chest. I kept a bag packed in the closet. Just in case. Because deep down, I knew what was coming. They weren't just going to fight me in court. They were going to try to break me outside of it. One morning, I opened my mailbox and found a glossy envelope. Inside was a brochure. The Miller Foundation, Preserving Generations. Pictures of the family estate. Scholarships. Smiling grandchildren. A legacy. At the bottom was a note, handwritten in Judith's tight, neat script. There's still time to do the right thing. I shredded it and burned the pieces in the sink. The hardest part was the silence from Daniel's friends. Our friends. People we'd laughed with, had over for dinner, whose weddings we'd attended. At first, I thought they didn't know. But then I realized they did. And they were staying out of it. Nobody wants to take sides in a custody battle. Especially when the other side has money and charm and a damn family foundation. Rachel stayed. Bless her. She checked in every day. She kept reminding me that the truth would matter. That a judge would see through the manipulation. But I was starting to wonder if truth had anything to do with this anymore. At the first hearing, I wore black. No reason, really. Just felt like war paint. Judith wore pearls. They smiled at me across the courtroom like we were at brunch. I didn't smile back. The judge didn't make a ruling that day. It was just motions and paperwork and scheduling. But I watched Charles whisper something to his lawyer, who nodded and wrote it down. And I knew. They weren't going to stop. This wasn't grief. It wasn't love. It was ownership. And I was the only thing standing between them and my son. I started noticing things in the house. Subtle things. At first, I thought I was losing it, stress, exhaustion, maybe the strain of pretending everything was fine for Owen's sake. But then it happened too often to ignore. The back door would be unlocked in the morning, even when I knew I'd checked it the night before. Owen's bedroom light turned on while we were out, no timer set. Drawers open in the kitchen that I hadn't used. My office chair pulled out. I changed the locks. Then 2 nights later, I heard footsteps on the porch, soft, deliberate. By the time I got to the window, there was no one there. But the motion light had clicked on. My neighbor across the street said they hadn't seen anything. Probably just a stray cat, he shrugged. It wasn't a cat. I called the police. Again. They took the report, asked the usual questions, offered to send a cruiser by every few hours. Nothing they could do unless someone broke in. I nodded, thanked them, shut the door, and didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I bought a security system. Camera by the front door. One at the back. Motion sensors inside. Alerts sent to my phone. It made me feel better, for about a day. Until I got an email. Subject: unauthorized access attempt, front door lock. Someone had tried to override the lock code at 2:13 a.m. 3 failed attempts, then silence. The door never opened, but they were trying. I showed the footage to my lawyer. Grainy video, a hooded figure standing just outside the frame of the camera. Smart, they knew the angles. All you could see was a blur and the glint of metal in their hand. She leaned back, folded her arms. They're not just trying to win in court. They're trying to rattle you. Get you to make a mistake. Or drive you out. Well, I said, it's working. She looked at me hard. You need to leave. Now. Somewhere they can't find you. Get ahead of them. But I was already behind. A letter arrived the next day, this one hand-delivered by a courier. No stamp. No return address. Notice of emergency motion, temporary custody transfer pending review. They were claiming I was mentally unfit. That the CPS visit, combined with community reports, showed I posed a risk to Owen's stability. They wanted temporary custody. I felt the room tilt sideways. My vision narrowed. My lawyer called within minutes. They filed it fast. We have 5 days to respond before the hearing. Can they win? They can't win, she said carefully. But they can buy time. Get temporary orders in place. Once they have him, even temporarily, it becomes harder to undo. Judges don't like moving kids around. You have to stop this now. I hung up the phone and walked into Owen's room. He was building a fort out of blankets and chair legs, humming to himself. He looked up and smiled. Can we have pancakes for dinner? Sure, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Of course we can. That night, I called Rachel and told her we were coming. No hesitation, she said. You don't even have to ask. I booked flights under our middle names. Paid cash. Packed light. Just what we needed for a few weeks. I told Owen it was a vacation. That we were going to see Aunt Rachel in the mountains. He was thrilled. Thought it was an adventure. He asked if there would be snow. I didn't have the heart to tell him I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. We left before dawn. I turned off the cameras, shut off the power, and left the keys with a friend I trusted. As the plane took off, Owen fell asleep against my arm. I watched the city shrink below us, the streets winding like veins through a body I didn't recognize anymore. And I thought of Daniel. What would he say if he saw all this? His family, the people who raised him, turning into a wall of lawyers and threats and whispers in the dark. He'd once told me, my parents can't help themselves. They think love means control. I didn't understand it then. Now, I did. We landed in Denver around noon. Rachel picked us up in her beat-up Subaru, hugged me like I was bleeding, and handed me a coffee without asking. You're safe, she said. Nobody knows you're here. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Not a full breath. Not peace. But something close. We settled into her guest room. A small space with 2 twin beds and a window that looked out over a row of pine trees. Owen loved it immediately. Said it felt like a treehouse. Rachel made chili that night. We sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sky turn from gold to blue to black. Do you think they'll stop? I asked. Rachel didn't answer right away. No, she said finally. But they'll have to work a hell of a lot harder now. I nodded. I believed her. But I also knew this wasn't over. The court date was in 8 days. And this time I was going to fight like hell. 8 days. That's what I had, 8 days to prepare for a court date that could change everything. 8 days to protect Owen, to prove I wasn't crazy, to show that the grief hadn't broken me the way they claimed it had. Rachel cleared out her home office for me. Said it wasn't a big deal, but I knew it was. I turned the space into a war room, notes, documents, sticky notes on the walls like I was tracking a conspiracy, because I was. The conspiracy was called Daniel's family. I started with affidavits. I reached out to everyone who'd ever seen me with Owen, his pediatrician, his pre-K teacher, even our old neighbor who'd helped me jumpstart my car once. Anyone who could say, in writing, that I was a good mother. Most of them were shocked. A few had already heard whispers. One friend, Clara, wrote back, I didn't want to get involved, but now I see they're not playing fair. Whatever you need, I'm in. I printed her letter first. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed a counter-motion to dismiss their emergency custody request. She worked late nights, emailed me at 2 a.m., went line by line through their petition and shredded it like meat through a grinder. They said I was unstable. She pulled my clean mental health record. They said I isolated Owen. She presented daycare attendance, medical records, social outings. They said I was erratic. She compiled 6 months of phone logs, text messages, grocery receipts, bedtime routines. Every scrap of normalcy she could find. You don't need to be supermom, she told me. You just need to be real. And consistent. Rachel took Owen hiking, to museums, playgrounds. She gave me space to prepare and gave him a sense of normalcy. I watched from the window sometimes, Owen racing across a field, hair flying, laughter echoing off the trees. And I realized something that made my stomach turn. They didn't want him because they loved him. They wanted him because he was Daniel's. Because he was the last piece of something they thought they owned. 3 nights before the court date, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost let it ring out. But something told me to answer. It was Judith. Claire, she said, like we were old friends. Her voice was syrupy sweet. I hope you're doing okay. I didn't say anything. She sighed, dramatic. We never wanted this to be messy. You know that, don't you? But you've put us in a difficult position. All we want is stability for Owen. I finally spoke. You mean control? That's not fair, she snapped. We're family. No, I said. You're his family. Daniels. You were never mine. There was silence on the other end. Then she said, low and cold, "You'll regret dragging this out." And she hung up. I played that voicemail for my lawyer. She smiled for the first time in days. "Thanks for the gift," she said. "That's intimidation. And it's going in the file." I was learning something through all of this. People like Judith only play nice when they think they're winning. The moment you push back, they drop the act. The day before the hearing, I talked to Owen. Not about court, not directly. I told him that sometimes grown-ups have to make really hard decisions. That sometimes, people disagree about what's best. But that no matter what happened, he would stay with me. That I would fight for him. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes, Daniel's eyes. Are they mad because I don't want to live with them? No, I said softly. They're mad because I said no. He nodded, wise in that strange way children can be. I'm glad you said no. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of Rachel's old house. Every sound felt sharper. Every shadow longer. I kept thinking about that voicemail, about the man on my porch at 2 a.m., about the fake smiles and the slashed tires. I'd always thought grief was the hardest part. I was wrong. Survival was the hardest part. Morning came like a fist. Court was at 9 a.m. downtown. I dressed simply, dark blue dress, hair pulled back, no makeup beyond the bare minimum. My lawyer told me to look calm. Measured. Nothing flashy. No anger. They wanted to paint me as emotional, unstable. Let them try. I walked into that courthouse with a spine made of steel and a heart made of fire. And Owen's hand in mine. He stayed with Rachel in the hallway, coloring, while I stepped into the courtroom. Judith and Charles were already there. They didn't smile this time. Neither did I. The judge entered. The hearing began. And for the first time since Daniel died, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. Courtrooms look nothing like they do on television. No soaring speeches. No last-minute confessions. Just wood-paneled walls, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the slow, grinding machinery of the law. The judge was a woman in her 60s. Sharp-eyed. No nonsense. She wore her robe like armor. Her nameplate said Han. Marlene Cartwright, but I could already tell, she wouldn't care who had more money or a shinier lawyer. She cared about facts. I had plenty. Their lawyer went first. She stood with the confidence of someone who billed by the minute and knew every one of those minutes cost more than my rent. Her voice was smooth. Practiced. She spoke of tradition, family values, and stability. Words that sounded harmless on their own but added up to something dangerous when used like weapons. Charles and Judith sat behind her, dressed in matching navy blue, faces solemn, hands folded like parishioners at a funeral. She told the court that Owen needed structure, that the loss of his father had destabilized his home environment, and that members of the community had raised concerns. Then she dropped it. We have reason to believe Mrs. Miller has not provided a consistent routine for the child and may be experiencing signs of psychological distress. She passed a folder to the judge. Inside were copies of the CPS report. The news article. Affidavits from people I'd never even met in Cedar Hill. The foundation of their case wasn't truth. It was a story, carefully constructed, well-financed, and full of holes. My lawyer stood and began to tear it apart. First, she introduced a stack of affidavits. Friends. Teachers. Doctors. People who'd actually met Owen. People who'd been in our lives before Daniel died, and after. Then she played the voicemail. Judith's voice filled the room, that cold, calculated threat. You'll regret dragging this out. It landed like a slap. Charles looked straight ahead. Judith's jaw clenched. But the judge didn't react. She just took notes. Then came the big one. We filed a motion to have the fake community concerns thrown out. None of the people were verifiable. Most didn't even live in Travis County. My lawyer leaned into it. This isn't about concern for Owen. This is about power. Mr. and Mrs. Miller are trying to use their influence to take custody from a capable, devoted mother, based not on evidence, but on legacy. Then she turned and nodded at me. My turn. I stood, walked to the front, and placed my hand on the Bible. Swore to tell the truth. My voice shook on the first question. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew what this moment meant. If I failed now, I could lose him. My lawyer asked me to describe our life. Before and after. What Owen liked. How we spent our days. What his routines were. How I'd handled the CPS visit, the threats, the move. Then came the hard part, cross-examination. Their lawyer stepped up. Mrs. Miller, would you describe yourself as emotionally stable? I stared at her. I'm grieving. Not unstable. Have you ever raised your voice at your son? Yes, I said. Once. He ran into the street without looking. I yelled his name. It probably saved his life. She blinked. Have you ever been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, or any other mental illness? No. Have you ever taken medication for stress? After my husband died, I took a mild sedative, prescribed, to help me sleep. For 2 weeks. She nodded, pretending to jot something down. And during that time, you were the sole caretaker of your child? Yes. Do you think it's responsible to take medication that affects your cognition while raising a minor? My lawyer objected. The judge sustained it. But the seed was planted. That was the trick, not to win, but to cast doubt. I kept my face calm. Inside, I was on fire. Then it was their turn. Judith took the stand first. She cried. A lot. Talked about how Daniel was their only son. How Owen reminded her of him. How losing both of them would be too much to bear. She used words like bloodline and duty and God's will. She said she only wanted to help. That they'd offered me support and I'd cut them out. Then she said the line I'd been waiting for. We just want what's best for the boy. He belongs with his family. My lawyer stood. Objection, Your Honor. Mrs. Miller is suggesting my client is not family. The judge raised an eyebrow. Sustained. Judith faltered. Just for a second. Charles didn't speak. Their lawyer must have known he'd come across colder than a corpse. He just sat there, stone-faced. When it was over, the judge asked one question. Is there any evidence, any documented instance, that the child was ever neglected, harmed, or put at risk while in his mother's care? Their lawyer hesitated. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded. She didn't give a ruling that day. But her face told me everything. We stepped outside the courtroom, into the cold Denver air. Rachel was waiting with Owen. He ran up, threw his arms around me. Can we get ice cream now? I kissed the top of his head. Yeah, baby. We earned it. That night, I watched him sleep. His tiny fingers curled around the edge of his blanket. His chest rising and falling, slow and steady. I knew this wasn't over. There'd be more hearings. More paperwork. More attacks. But that day in court, I stood in front of a judge, looked Daniel's family in the eyes, and didn't flinch. They'd underestimated me. They thought I'd fold. They forgot one thing. I'm a mother. And I will burn the whole world down before I let anyone take my son. The ruling came 3 days later, via email. I opened it alone, sitting in Rachel's kitchen with a cold cup of coffee and Owen napping upstairs after a morning hike. I don't know what I expected, maybe a dramatic build-up, a call from my lawyer, some cinematic moment of relief or devastation. But instead, it was a single sentence at the top of a formal PDF. The court finds no sufficient cause to grant temporary conservatorship to the petitioners. That was it. No custody transfer. No forced visitation. No supervised parenting. The judge's ruling went on to say that there was no evidence of neglect, no indicators of harm, and that the child's routine and well-being were appropriate and consistent with healthy development. It wasn't a final ruling, just the temporary emergency motion, but it was a line in the sand. They hadn't taken him. They'd tried. And they failed. I forwarded the ruling to my lawyer. 2 minutes later, she called me. "This doesn't mean they're giving up," she said. "But they've taken a hit. And now they know you're not backing down." I nodded. "So what happens now?" "They'll regroup. Maybe file again under a new angle. Maybe try to win Owen over directly. You need to keep a record of everything." "I already am." "And Claire," she paused, "you did good." It was the first time anyone had said that to me since the funeral. That afternoon, Owen and I sat on the porch. He was coloring a dinosaur with neon orange stripes. I was pretending to read. He glanced up. "Did we win?" I looked at him. "For now." "Are they gonna come back?" "Maybe." He shrugged and went back to coloring. "Okay. As long as we're together." 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at Rachel's door. Judith's handwriting on the envelope. I considered throwing it away. But curiosity is a strange thing. It's not about wanting to know, it's about needing to. Inside was a single-page letter, handwritten. No lawyer. No legalese. Just this. "Claire. We didn't want this. You have to understand, Daniel was everything to us. When we lost him, we lost our future. Owen is all we have left of him. That's not something you can understand. He wasn't your only child. He wasn't your everything. You may think we're controlling or cruel. But we're not. We're trying to preserve what little of Daniel remains in this world. You are a young woman. You will move on. You will remarry. You will have another life. But Owen is ours too. In blood. In spirit. In name. And if you won't share him with us, if you insist on keeping him from his family, we will keep fighting. We are not going away. Judith." "No, sincerely. No love. Just that." A threat dressed as grief. I sat there, holding the letter in my lap, fingers trembling, not with fear, but with rage. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about legacy. It was about possession. I brought the letter to my lawyer. She read it twice. "This isn't evidence, not exactly. It doesn't make any claims. But it's useful. It proves intent. Can we file for a restraining order?" "Not yet. Not unless they cross another line." "But if they do?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. That night, I started drafting my own letter. Not to Judith. To Owen. A letter he won't read for years. But someday, he'll ask. Why we left. Why Grandma and Grandpa don't call. Why we don't visit the house with the big porch and a garden full of roses. And I'll hand him this letter, not to poison him, not to make him angry, but so he knows the truth. That I loved his father. That I fought for him. That no one had the right to decide his life but him. 3 weeks passed without incident. Then 4. Then 5. The calls stopped. The emails stopped. Even the lawyer's office went quiet. Rachel said maybe they'd given up. Maybe they'd accepted it. I wasn't naive enough to believe that. People like Judith don't give up. They bide their time. They find another door. But so would I. Because now I had a taste of something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. And I intended to keep it, even if I had to drag it, kicking and screaming, into the light. 6 weeks passed. Then 7. Then silence became suspicion. I kept waiting for the next blow, a new motion, a surprise hearing, another visit from someone with too much charm and too many questions. But nothing came. No emails. No phone calls. Not even a passive-aggressive birthday card. And that's when I realized, they weren't backing off. They were setting up. It started with Owen's new school. Rachel's town had a great public elementary, small classes, friendly teachers, and a principal who still remembered all the kids' names. I filed the transfer papers, submitted our new address, and settled Owen in with a new backpack and a fresh box of crayons. Week 1, everything was fine. Week 2, I noticed a man at drop-off. Black SUV. Aviators. Sitting just far enough to be invisible unless you were looking. And I was always looking now. By day 3, he wasn't even pretending to hide. He didn't speak. Didn't approach Owen. Just watched. Rachel wanted me to call the police. He's stalking you, she said. This is harassment. I did call, filed a report. They took it seriously. Took the license plate, ran it. The officer came back and said the SUV was a rental, registered to an LLC out of Dallas. Could be a private investigator, he said. Can they just do that? He gave me a look. It's legal to sit in a car and watch a public sidewalk. Rachel cursed. I didn't. I'd been expecting this. My lawyer confirmed it. They're probably building a new case, she said. Trying to prove something's unstable. Maybe looking for a partner, a job loss, anything they can spin into change of circumstance. So what do I do? Live your life. But document everything. Assume you're being watched. And so I did. I logged everything. Owen's school drop-offs. Grocery receipts. Playdates. Every doctor's visit. Every phone call. Rachel joked that I was turning into Jason Bourne. I didn't laugh. Because I knew exactly what they were doing, baiting me. If I cracked, if I snapped and screamed at the man in the SUV, if I yanked Owen out of school, if I made any irrational move, it would go in the report. Filed under erratic behavior. It was a psychological siege. But I'd lived under siege since the day Daniel died. They'd forgotten, you can't starve someone who already knows how to live on scraps. Then came the trap. It was subtle. Ingenious, in its way. One afternoon, Owen's teacher pulled me aside. Just wanted to let you know, she said, we had a surprise visit today. A woman came by, said she was Owen's grandmother. Said you'd approved it. My stomach turned to ice. What did she look like? Mid-60s. Elegant. Very polite. Had a southern accent. Said her name was Judith Miller. Of course she did. She didn't see him, the teacher added quickly. Policy doesn't allow it without your consent. She left peacefully. But she said she'd be back, said you must have forgotten to notify the front office. I smiled through gritted teeth. Thank you. I'll handle it. They were testing the boundary. Seeing if they could get close. See Owen in person. Maybe even get him to talk. To slip, to say something they could use. I filed a no-contact order the next day. Did it stick? No. Not yet. The judge said there hadn't been direct confrontation or threatening behavior. But now the paper trail existed. That mattered. Everything mattered now. That night, I sat on the porch alone. The stars were out, big, open sky like I hadn't seen in years. Rachel was asleep. Owen was in bed, clutching the same ragged dinosaur he'd had since he was 3. I stared at the dark tree line beyond the fence and whispered aloud. You're not getting him. I don't care what you try. No one answered. But I knew they heard. 2 days later, Owen came home with a folded piece of paper in his backpack. A drawing. Crayon on printer paper. Stick figures. One big, one small. And a house. At the bottom, in awkward block letters, to my sweet boy, from Grandma Judith. Love you forever. There was no signature. But I didn't need one. It wasn't the drawing that scared me. It was the fact that it had made it into his bag. I confronted the school. They were horrified. Promised to investigate. Promised tighter protocol. Promised it wouldn't happen again. But the damage was done. They'd crossed the line. And now, I could strike back. My lawyer filed for a full restraining order the next morning. With it, we submitted the drawing. The teacher's statement. The license plate of the black SUV. The voicemail from Judith. The letter she'd mailed to Rachel's house. The judge scheduled an emergency hearing. This wasn't a custody battle anymore. This was interference with a child. It carried weight. It carried consequences. And for the first time I saw fear in their eyes. The courtroom was smaller this time. No gallery, no press. Just the judge, the lawyers, and us, two sides of a war pretending to be civil. Judith sat across from me, dressed in a pale blue cardigan like she was going to brunch, not a restraining order hearing. Charles was absent. Probably decided his poker face wasn't up to the task. Their lawyer was new. The other one, the one with the nails and the voice like a scalpel, was gone. My guess? She told them this wasn't worth the risk anymore. Too much exposure. Too much noise. Too much me. The judge opened the hearing with no fanfare. Just a nod, a shuffle of papers, and a quiet, "Let's begin." My lawyer laid it out plainly. The private investigator. The school incident. The drawing. The voicemail. The unauthorized contact. Ms. Miller's actions represent a sustained campaign of coercion, manipulation, and interference in a child's life, she said. This is no longer about custody. This is about control. And it has to stop. Then she passed up a folder. Inside were every document we'd collected. 10 tabs. 30 pages. A wall of truth. Judith's lawyer tried to spin it. She's a grieving grandmother, he said. Her actions, while ill-advised, stem from loss, not malice. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the judge. She merely wished to connect with her grandson. Without consent, the judge interrupted. He stammered. Yes, but. Without consent, she repeated. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Miller. Do you wish to speak? I stood. My voice was low. Steady. I'd practiced this in the mirror for weeks. Your Honor, I said, I have never denied that Judith and Charles Miller are Owen's grandparents. I have never said they didn't love him. What I am saying, and what this hearing is about, is that love does not give them the right to manipulate, threaten, or terrorize me to get what they want. I paused. My son lost his father. I lost my husband. And they tried to turn that loss into leverage. I looked at Judith then. Really looked at her. She looked smaller than I remembered. But I won't let grief become an excuse for control. And I won't let legacy matter more than safety. Silence filled the room. The judge nodded. She didn't take long. I am granting a protective order in favor of Claire Miller and her son, Owen. All contact with the child must cease. Any attempt to circumvent this order will be considered a violation and prosecuted accordingly. This court does not take family interference lightly. She banged the gavel once. It was over. Outside, I stood on the courthouse steps and felt the weight finally slide off my shoulders. It didn't crash or shatter, it just left. Like an old coat you didn't realize you'd been carrying until the sun hit your skin again. Rachel hugged me. Owen asked if we could get pancakes. We did. That night, Owen fell asleep fast, worn out from cartoons and maple syrup and not knowing how close he'd come to losing everything. I watched him breathe. His tiny chest rising, falling. And for the first time since Daniel died, I cried. Not from fear. Not from exhaustion. But from relief. Weeks passed. No calls. No letters. No men in SUVs. The school tightened its protocols. My lawyer recommended a name change for Owen, not legal, not yet, but informal. Something to separate him from the last name they kept using like a key. He chose Fox. Said it sounded fast. Clever. I didn't argue. I wrote one last letter to Judith. I never sent it. Probably never will. But it said this. You lost a son. I lost a husband. But that did not give you the right to try and take what was left. You believed blood was ownership. That grief was a currency. That love could be leveraged like land. But Owen is not land. He is not a name. He is not yours. He is his own. And he is safe now. From you. Claire. The storm is over. We're still rebuilding. But now? Now we do it on our terms. With open windows. And doors that stay locked.